Catflap Chats, we are back again this week. I'm going to try and do you a little bit of justice with everything here, but we'll see. So this week we are joined by the fabulous Elma Smit. Now, I tried writing down all of your different jobs different hats that you wear as such. So I've got radio DJ, TV presenter, journalist, breakfast anchor, Supersport TV. You work with the rugby, you work with the cricket, you did the World Tens recently. You've got trending SA on 3. There's probably loads more that you've done, but I suppose people over here will know you most famously for your work that you do with the rugby. How are you? What's going on in your world? Did I do you justice there or not?
Oh, that's so kind. I should pay you. Basically, I just make content. That's kind of what I tell people is whatever people will let me kind of create content around, I'm there for it. Yes, and probably the coolest thing I've done today was Rugby World Cup Daily at the Rugby World Cup in Japan, where I essentially got paid to cry a lot because I'm a really emotional rugby fan, and I got to do some really cool stuff with an amazing team of people there. I love sports. I love making cool stories for people to watch. At the moment, it's summer in Joburg, so I'm well, and most of South Africa knocks off work tomorrow for about 2 to 3 weeks holiday.
Okay.
And so that feeling is in the air, like everyone is this close. Either staying at home, chilling, having gin and tonics in the sunshine, or seeing family or going to the beach.
Class, I love that. What is it like? So this is going to go out on Monday, okay? So this will go live on Monday. So for people hearing it, it's Thursday today. What's Christmas like in South Africa? Because it's cold, it's wet, it's windy. It's actually sunny today after all that, but it tends to be minging here in the winter. What's it like in South Africa?
Cardiff, sunny.
I know. What's the chances?
I love Cardiff, by the way. No, so I've only done a cold Christmas, I think 2 or 3 times in my life.
Yeah.
So it's unusual, I'm sure, if this is something you've never experienced, but for us, Christmas is braaiing, a barbecue, and being out in the sun, tanning. And my family and many families tend to do Christmas lunch as like cold meats and salads, lots of watermelon, lots of ice cream, and a lot of kind of spending time outside, regardless of kind of where you find yourself in the country. It's an outdoors celebration more than anything, I think.
Class, I love that. That sounds like a bit of me. I hate the cold, so I am a proper summer person. So weirdly, my family live in New Zealand, and I've never done Christmas there. I know, it's weird, isn't it? Like I don't know. So
what is your excuse?
Well, I tend to go over there for events. So I went over for the World Cup 2011. My sister got married in Australia 2 years ago, so I went over for that. So next year I'm hoping to go on the Lions, but if not, then I'll be then trying to go over there maybe for Christmas. But it sounds like a bit of me. What's going on in your world at the moment then? So tell the guys kind of what you're up to day to day. And I know you've just come back from Bermuda with the Tens, and you've just done the Rugby World Cup draw. Is that right?
Yes. So the great thing about 2020, the one upside to this pandemic has been the fact that I have been able to make quite a bit of content for the ICC, who I did the Cricket World Cup for in England and Wales in 2019, and also for World Rugby right here from Joburg, which is not something I ever thought I'd be able to do. So the Rugby World Cup draw and being able to host that from here during a pandemic was such an honor, particularly considering I had been contact traced. Someone on set at the TV show that I do for SABC3 had tested positive, and I was actually in isolation, and I could still host the draw. So the fact that we have adapted the way we have and are kind of nimble enough now to create content as long as you have fast internet, allowed me to do the draw on, and that was such a cool production to work on. During lockdown earlier in the year, I made a weekly show with the ICC, which was so crazy because the control room was in Singapore. The ICC's team are based in Dubai.
Yeah.
We would sometimes record the show at 3:30 SA time
Okay.
because Ian Smith is in New Zealand, Ian Bishop is in the West Indies, and we would try to find a window in time that would kind of work for everyone. Luckily, because I work in breakfast radio here in South Africa, getting up at that hour of the morning isn't the biggest disruption to my routine. It's only an hour earlier than I normally get up. So I said, that's fine. I'll take one for the team. But the upside is genuinely that I've been able to still make content and work with these teams that I managed to do really cool stuff with last year, despite the pandemic. At the moment in South Africa, I do sport on a breakfast radio show that broadcasts to the northern half of the country. It's like BBC Radio 2. It's really commercial, adult contemporary stuff.
Yeah.
And I host kind of something like The View, which is like a really kind of panel, opinion, personality-driven talk show where a few of us sit around a table 5 nights a week for half an hour and discuss what's trending, and that's Trending SA.
Class. That sounds really busy then. I mean, where do you find the time to do what you want to do?
Well, these are all things that, don't tell anyone, I'd probably do for free.
Yeah, I won't tell anyone.
Yeah, I get to really just have interesting conversations, meet really interesting people, watch sport, and have that be my job. On the weekends, I'm kind of constantly in front of the TV, and that's not a chore, that's not a drag. And I have a perfect get out of jail free card because I have to watch, because I have to report on it from Monday to Friday. So I don't feel like I work kind of crazy hard. The hours are nuts. That's, I think, the thing. I wish I had a few more hours in a day. Yeah. But then I kind of think Beyonce also has 24, so I should probably still get on with it. I'm like, oh, I wish I had more time. And then I'm like, okay, wait. There are some people out there who are doing amazing things with the same number of hours.
Yeah, of course.
This year, it's crazy though. This is probably the year that I have worked so I worked straight through lockdown. Yeah. It's the first year in a long time that we didn't take a week's holiday anywhere, and we didn't take away for a single weekend. There were no breaks. So for the last 50 weeks, we have worked at least 5, sometimes 7 days a week. I mean, Bermuda was a great change of scenery, and I count myself incredibly fortunate to have been able to travel in 2020, but you are still on a tournament. You are still delivering content. Like, we were still making shows even on non-match days.
Of course.
So, I mean, it was still a work trip. So I'm really excited about taking a few days off next week, just to woosah a bit.
I bet. What did you think of the Bermuda tents? I knew a couple of the players that went out there, and I chatted with Ollie Phillips as well a couple of weeks ago. So he was training in our gym for a bit, and he said it was unbelievable. But what did you make of it? And is it something that you reckon will take off?
I hope it'll take off. Tens rugby is really interesting. Like, I loved the format. I really enjoyed it. Look, to have been able to work on live rugby anywhere, it was amazing. To be able to work on it in Bermuda, even better. And do you know what I really appreciated is how the tournament adapted. It was probably the most 2020 version of a rugby tournament, because we had a hurricane. There was a player who tested positive, and a team that had to go into isolation. So many kind of curveballs came at this event, and we just kind of kept rolling with it. And the players pitched up, players who have not played for months, rocked up in very good condition and incredibly hungry to just get out there and play. And it was amazing to see how much energy everyone brought to the project. It was also, for me, from a content making perspective, it was also just really rad working with people like Ollie and Rob Whitman and Alex Payne and Nick Heath. And then the behind the scenes, the broadcast crew, interestingly enough, was about a third South African. So a lot of guys that I've worked with over the years over here, haven't worked with for a while, and then got to work with again, which was like a little reunion. A bunch of guys, Welsh and UK-based broadcast crew, and then quite a bit of broadcast technical crew members from the States.
Okay.
And that was interesting because in South Africa, we don't get to see a lot of American rugby. I mean, we know that it's happening. We read about it. We see highlights, clips. There are plenty of South Africans playing in Major League Rugby, but it was very different seeing them actually playing in front of your eyes with players you know and kind of see regularly, and then also working with broadcast crew just to kind of see how they do it.
Do they look at the game slightly differently, do they? Like the way they do things, would it be different to what we would class as, I suppose, core would be Tri-Nations or Six Nations, the way that they broadcast and do things? Do the Americans do it differently?
Well, they were kind of really technical crews, so they didn't have that much impact on the way that the event was packaged and presented. But what was interesting was a lot of those American crew members had very little exposure to rugby. And so this was they would be skilled in audio and would often work on golf, or would particularly back home be working on tennis or whatever. And so it was really just interesting to get their perspective on rugby as newcomers to the sport and to tens rugby, which they really enjoyed. A lot of them were pretty familiar with sevens rugby already. They had some level of exposure to Major League Rugby, but tens rugby was a really interesting innovation, and they really felt like it has the legs to work in the States. And I think the other thing that was also great timing is we were there during the American election.
Of course.
We were watching a lot of American TV as well, because that's the TV you get in Bermuda. Like you literally get domestic Florida kind of really local TV. And it was very interesting kind of speaking to them about the American elections. Like, what are your families seeing and experiencing? What are your feelings and your thoughts about it? So it was just a fascinating experience.
Class. So so you don't just become a good content creator overnight, and you don't, anchor TV shows and breakfast radio shows without putting the work in first. Give us a bit of a background on kind of growing up, and did you play sport, and how did you get into, I suppose, journalism, and then into that journey of being in front of the camera as well?
Yeah, I think I've always been a broadcaster kind of first and foremost. The sport almost happened to me. I started working in radio when I was in high school at a local community radio station.
Cool.
I've always wanted to work in radio. That was really the dream.
So I work in radio now for Capital FM.
Yes.
I don't think enough people realise how cool of an industry it is.
And you know what? Particularly when young women come to me and say, I want to do what you do, my first piece of advice that I give everyone interested in any kind of broadcasting is go find the closest community radio station and go work there for free. Radio teaches you to tell stories, to create content, and also to find your voice, to find a distinct enough persona, not a persona, but your take on things, the kind of way that you love delivering stories. And also it teaches you to be succinct and be able to clearly plan how you get into it, how it develops, and how you get out, which is crucial, that last bit. I learned so much from working in radio. So I was the station that I worked for in Paarl, which is my hometown, literally it was called Radio KC, the sound that sets you free, 108.8 FM. I worked on a Saturday night show, and most of the people who called in were in prison. So not glamorous, didn't earn a cent, but kind of really got a taste and the bug bit. And then at university, I studied law and worked at the campus radio station, did everything I could, got really stuck in there, got my degree, but kind of really realized probably in my first or second year already that this was what I would want to do. And then got a TV gig straight out of radio in the month that I graduated, to work for a local channel which was similar in format to MTV.
Okay,
like
nice.
Lifestyle. And so the show format was close to TRL. I don't know if you guys got TRL.
I remember that from back in the day.
Yeah, so live performances in studio, audience, charts. And I had like a mohawk, and I've interviewed Jared Leto from 30 Seconds to Mars and Adam Duran from The Counting Crows. So anyone who came to South Africa music wise, I would interview, and we'd have local acts on. And so I was really the rock and roll chick. I emceed festivals. So the South African version of Glastonbury is called Opi Kopi, which is out in the bush in the dust every winter. And I hosted and emceed Opi Kopi for a bunch of years. And then I hosted Breakfast TV. I worked for 5FM, which is like our Radio 1. And then in 2011, SuperSport announced that for the first time ever, they planned to send a woman to cover the Rugby World Cup in New Zealand. And this was unheard of. So when I say that sport happened to me, it's because I went to the same school André Pollard did, and Skalk Burger did, and John de Villiers did. So I went to like a huge rugby school.
Yeah.
And I love rugby, and I grew up with a mom who's obsessed with rugby. I studied at Stellenbosch, which is the university that dominates the Varsity Cup rugby competition in South Africa.
Yeah.
So culturally, I mean, I come from that background. But this was never, when I was young, when I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go in the media space, that was never even, it didn't even occur to anyone. It was the most far-fetched concept. So when they said that they wanted to take a woman to the Rugby World Cup, I just thought, wow, this is really progressive. Started watching the auditions, because it was like Idols. They had auditions at stadiums around the country. The audition rounds were broadcast on TV. And I just watched along, like fascinated.
Yeah.
And then I saw women auditioning, and they'd ask them things like, how long is a half in rugby? And someone would say, which half? And I'd just be like,
that's horrific.
And because I was working in TV already, I didn't think, I should enter. And then we shot the TV show that I was doing in the same studio complex that SuperSport uses. And I bumped into one of their producers at the canteen, and he was like, you should really consider entering for this. And I said, but I work in TV already. I don't want to fall flat on my face.
Of course.
I don't want people to laugh at me. And he said, listen, we are seeing a lot of women with actual broadcast experience coming into this thing, and we are it's not closed. It's not, we're not only looking for novices, we're just looking for the best person we can take to New Zealand. And then I ended up entering at the very last round in Pretoria. And when I walked in, they were like, no, you can't do the script we give everyone. We're going to come to you live off the cuff now. We're in Durban. Like a swarm of bees have taken over the pitch. You are pitch side. I'm coming to you from Randburg, and cue Elma. And I just had to kind of waffle.
Please say that you've got that on video somewhere.
I don't know if it is, like, it has to be somewhere on some library storage facility at SuperSport. I don't know. But so yeah, and then in the end, after months of this reality show drawn out story, I won, and I went to New Zealand to cover the tournament in 2011.
Yeah.
And since then, I've really had to, for the first few years, pitch where I felt I belonged as part of the rugby coverage, because I don't think anyone kind of really knew what to do with women in rugby, but in sport in general for a while there. And hosted everything rugby that you can host in South Africa, And at the same time, I've worked in radio kind of consistently, produced and hosted other TV stuff along the way as well. So I've just kind of always been dabbling across both.
I pick up on the sort of female in sport, and you were the first female to go across. As you were sort of forging your own career, because I don't know what it's like growing up in South Africa, obviously, but, you know, like you said here, there is a real progressive movement to get more females, more ethnic minorities involved in everyday jobs, broadcasting, whatever it might be, right? What was it like being a female in that industry? Because for me, like my experience of radio here, it's actually, you know, a massively even split in terms of gender, race, sexual orientation. You know, radio is really inclusive. Was it like that in South Africa, or, you know, especially as you got into the sports side, was it very male dominated? And did you find that you were kind of not seen as equal, even though your broadcasting capability might have been as good, if not better, potentially?
Yeah, so I would often be, but like by about 10 years, the youngest person in the room.
Yeah.
And then also be a woman, and then also be Afrikaans.
Yeah.
So the Afrikaans culture is a lot more conservative than I think a lot of people realize.
Okay.
And still quite patriarchal. So it's also very unheard of, you know, almost in some environments, you know, you should know your place.
Yeah, of course.
But I definitely experienced a bit of that resistance, both from viewers, but also, you know, kind of socially and in work environments. Like I definitely knew some people really backed me and wanted me to excel, and kind of felt like this change was necessary for the sake of visibility, because women can't dream themselves into new positions if that little seed isn't planted. I mean, I'm an example of that.
Yeah.
And so I've had so many girls come up to me and said, I want to do what you do. And then I would say, listen, if you want to work in sport, you do not only have to work on camera or be limited to being a journalist. You could also be a team manager. You could also do PR. You could be a referee. And those are some of the more interesting conversations I've had along the way, is with women who fulfill more unseen roles, because that space is often goes unrecognized.
Yeah, of course.
So I think that's been the coolest kind of camaraderie that I've experienced, is just women in the broader sense who work in environments where they are often the only woman in the room, and often older women don't take on these very risky kind of forays into new environments, because they've often already established themselves as something else. Like, yeah. I was 25, which I think is why I was both foolish and kind of keen on the risk of this.
Yeah, naive to it.
If I was any older, I would probably go, it's fine, someone else can fight, it's fine.
Yeah.
But because I was young enough to go, if this doesn't work out, I can still pivot and do something very different in 3 years' time.
Yeah.
And so I think that helped a lot. I would say that it has shifted, but we are not nearly where you guys are in the UK.
Okay. So it's going. Did you feel extra pressure then, being that lead on the rugby, but also being an Afrikaans female as well? Was there pressure externally, internally, from social media? Like, how did you deal with all that?
So it's that classic thing where, whether you're a woman who is an engineer or a woman who is an OB camera operator, if you make a mistake, it's because women don't belong in that space. It's not right, because you forgot something. So if Nick Mallet forgets a player's name on live coverage, it's just because Nick Mallet forgot a player's name. If I didn't have everyone's names at the tips of my fingers, it would serve as justification for, see, they don't belong there. And that's a lot of the pressure I put on myself as well. Like, I don't blame anyone for that. It's just that it's the same when you're a minority. If you're the first black person in a working environment, you are necessarily probably going to feel the weight of responsibility to change perceptions.
Yeah, it's difficult, that is, especially when there's enough pressure, I suppose, doing live TV or whatever anyway, without then that extra pressure coming in from you because everyone's looking for it.
But at the same time, it is what I chose to do, because very early on, I realized that I don't like pre-recorded TV.
Okay.
Pre-recorded TV is like, oh my God, it's stale. It's so boring. It's heavily scripted. It's super formulaic. It's dull. They will literally smooth any kind of quirk out of your personality, because so much time and energy has been spent on like putting this thing together so absolutely perfectly.
Yeah.
I live for the live element. I live for when things go wrong. I live because otherwise it feels quite robotic and monotonous. So live TV is like radio. It relies a lot on your technical skill. It relies a lot on your personality. It requires a certain kind of set of balls to be able to stare down the red light and just ride it out, because it is a bit like surfing. You never know, what's going to happen next. And I loved live TV. I got a taste of it at a very young age. I was 21 when I started hosting a live weekly music show with a live audience and live music performances, and stuff went wrong all the time. And so I realized after a few years in TV that there are not many of these really high intensity live environments left to work in, because it's very expensive to make TV. You need to have a lot of people, plenty of hands on deck. It's a lot more affordable to make very safe, very packaged stuff. And I realized that sport is the best kind of live broadcast environment to work in, because there is no script. It is the closest thing to actual reality TV that you'll ever find. And if you are working on an outside broadcast at venue, you are contending with such a wide range of factors. I mean, there are so many things that shift, that change, that can kind of go wrong, that you have to adapt to and just kind of roll with. And I live for that rush. That's why I do it.
Have you ever had any proper stinkers, or something's happened and you've just gone, I've got no words, like I don't know what is going on over there?
So, oh my God, so many, too many to mention. Also because I'm constantly translating.
Oh yeah, so, of course, second language.
Sometimes I feel like the English bundles run out. So no, I mean, we have there must be so many clips out there of me looking like an absolute idiot, because things go wrong all the time. But you also kind of have to really learn to laugh at yourself and not take yourself too seriously.
Yeah, you've always got a smile on your face. Anything I've seen, I'll give you that.
Yeah, it's also not, I mean, it's not open heart surgery.
Yeah, of course.
We're not saving lives here. We're just making fun stories.
And also, do you obviously watch a lot of live sport across various different sports, and it's the ones where the commentators or the presenters, broadcasters, they get animated with it. Like we've just watched the Nations Cup up in the Northern Hemisphere now. So you've got the 8 teams. Obviously, Fiji were out for a bit, but seeing Dylan Hartley and Sam Warburton and Brian Habana get so animated as they're talking and having a bit of banter. To me, a bit like radio as well. They're people that you could be mates with and you can relate to, even though I'm never going to get 100 caps, 80 caps, 50 tries, a professional contract. They still feel like mates that I could probably go on the piss with and have a few beers with and have a good laugh. And that's what I really like about where it's going at the moment, and it's not so robotic as it may have been, in yesteryear.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the fact that I was talking to someone at the end of last year when I came back from Japan and said, the fact that I am doing the most interesting work I've done in my career under the banners of governing bodies and brands, because I've done a double series of content for Vodacom with John de Villiers and Skulk Brits.
I've watched a couple.
Yeah, I mean, and there's no rugby involved. I mean, not even remotely rugby involved.
Yeah.
It's literally just us, doing stupid shit. So the fact that we get to have so much fun and be given so much leniency from organizations that are traditionally known for being very serious, like World Rugby and the ICC, and also even brands like Vodacom, for them to really be throwing money at making content that actively pushes what people have come to expect from sport is amazing. That is a very exciting space to be in right now.
Yeah, it is cool. Do you feel pressure to be, because you come across like you're a bit of a pioneer almost without asking for it, to be that lead female in South Africa who is currently the face of, you know, all these big and great things that you're doing out there? Do you feel the pressure to turn up and be the lead for that next generation coming through?
I think it's pressure. I'm very excited about the number of women who have really stepped into this space in the last while, and there are a few of us now in South Africa. Things have changed. In the last 9 years, we have made so much progress on so many fronts.
Yeah.
I'm genuinely just excited for more women to take up that space, both in broadcasting, but also women who are athletes. Women's sport in South Africa still falls far behind what you guys see and know in the UK.
Okay.
I loved the Netball World Cup and the kind of coverage that I saw for it in the UK. In South Africa, there were pockets of kind of people in media and fans speaking out in support of the Proteas, but it still falls so far behind what's like cricket and rugby and football enjoy here. I actively try and carry women's sport in all of my sport bulletins I do on radio, and try and give some of the platform that I kind of manage to women's sport. But sponsorship is never going to come to the party if we as fans don't demand it, and the only way as fans we will be able to demand it is by watching,
seeing it,
by tweeting, by putting it on the agenda. It can't only be driven by sponsorship. It can't only be driven by governing bodies or by a few members of the media. It has to be a mass fan support and influence.
A collective, and that is tough, and that does take time to make change like that. You know, like you said, it's, you know, there's been massive improvements in 9 years. Well, it's, you know, it might take another 9 years to really see some huge change again, which, you know, you've just got to keep fighting the good fight then, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the amount of, the depth of rugby talent in this country is it is frightening, because we haven't even scratched the surface. And 2 years ago, we had almost 1,100 professional contracted rugby players in this country. In the country, not the ones outside. There's probably as many.
I was about to say, South Africans are all over.
Yeah, we are literally everywhere.
Yeah.
We have South Africans playing in Romania and Russia. So if you look at the depth of rugby, men playing rugby, the amount of talent we have in this country, the women's athletes are still entirely untapped, because there are very few women in South Africa making a living out of any kind of sport. Very, very, very few.
Yeah.
It is a shocking indictment on our relationship to women's sport and the perception of women who are athletes. But I think that we are slowly waking up.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, the one name that I would give would be Caster Semenya. And obviously everything that's gone on with her and vilified just for being a phenomenal athlete. I suppose all the good work you might do then gets shut down from all of the negative press that she might get for winning, you know, titles, world championships, whatever it might be. And it's a detriment then to South African sport as well.
Yeah, it is so incredibly tough. I sometimes feel so guilty for the fact that as women in broadcasting, we can earn a living covering sport, but the women who play it are really battling. That just feels the wrong way around.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, look, you work hard, and you're obviously, if they offer you a contract, you're not going to say no because they're not
No.
getting paid. But I understand what you mean. It's that is difficult. What's it been like being a South African over the last sort of year and a half? Then with the rugby and the highs of that, and then almost this year you haven't played a game. Like, how's that sort of roller coaster been?
It's been so nuts. Look, and I think that as far as the rugby is concerned, you have to kind of take the last 5 years into account,
Yeah,
because this rugby journey has been extremely high and extremely low. I mean, we've had such extremes, from losing to Japan at the 2015 Rugby World Cup in Brighton, to then finishing third at that tournament, which is pretty
yeah,
decent, but didn't feel decent. I mean, it just like all everyone could still taste was the bile from the Battle of Brighton.
yeah,
And then 2016 and 17 were some pretty dark times.
yeah,
The resurgence that we saw in 2018 was encouraging, but no one quite knew whether it was going to be too little too late, because we consider that Rugby World Cup cycle of 4 years being something that you need 4 years to kind of
yeah.
build into, you know. Of course, the win was probably the greatest sporting event I've ever involved South Africans. Like, I don't think there's anything bigger than that. That win was so far-reaching in its impact.
Was it bigger than 95?
Oh, definitely.
Was it? I would know, see, because 95, I was only a kid, so I didn't really understand the ramifications of all of that. 2007, um, I would assume it would have been big. England obviously got to the final after a terrible start against South Africa, if I remember rightly, and then got to the final. Obviously, Q8, did he score? Did he not? Well, I don't know. We'll leave that there. But it didn't, like, again, I was younger, but I didn't quite see, like, and probably because social media wasn't so prevalent, I didn't quite see the far-reaching impact of it, where this one seems to have, like, Khaleesi and the work he's been doing and what he's been saying, it seems to have really truly been worldwide in its impact.
Yeah, so I think 95 was big in South Africa. It was very big in South Africa. I was 9 years old, and I remember, obviously, as much as you can remember from a nine-year-old's perspective, how it was almost unbelievable. Not that we won, but that Madiba would like them. I mean,
Yeah.
so that changed how we saw ourselves, to a large extent. What I think makes 2019 bigger is it didn't only change how we see ourselves, it changed how rugby is seen worldwide.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
Okay.
for a black captain to hold that trophy, I mean, I had friends who literally live in other parts of the world who are not South African, who said, as a black person, this made me feel validated in a really weird way. Like, I didn't expect it to reach me, because I'm not South African.
Yeah.
But the visibility, I feel like black athletes have really stepped into like a really interesting space over the last year or two, where, I mean, obviously this year with Black Lives Matter, but I think it's almost, it predates Black Lives Matter to a certain extent. There has been such a widespread awareness of the significance of representation.
Yeah.
And the players in that team who won the Rugby World Cup in 2019 had a very keen appreciation for what significance they hold to people, and that it's not a personal triumph, it is a much broader story. So the fact that, I mean, I said this, I told the story on another podcast, but I keep coming back to the fact that Makazole Mapimpi being a guy from a small village in the Eastern Cape, coming from a culture where, on the basis of facts at the moment, in South Africa, men are treating women incredibly badly across the board.
Yeah.
And so for a guy who never speaks at press conferences, hardly ever does interviews, speaks very, very little English, and is almost never heard, for him to use the opportunity that he had in a warm-up match before that Rugby World Cup, when he scored a try and knew the camera was going to be on him, to write a message of support to this woman who was murdered on his strapping, which contravened team protocols at that stage. For him to have had the wherewithal before the match to do that and to decide he was going to score and then he was going to take the stand, that is unlike, I mean, that shouldn't be underestimated in terms of what a sea change that is in the way that South African athletes have traditionally shied away from controversy. They've tried to stay out of the limelight and let, you know, what they do on the field do the talking.
Yeah.
But as you can see with the number of players who've taken up feeding schemes and a variety of causes during 2020 to help reach more people, do more good, use their reputation and their name to attract sponsorship for specific programs that they're passionate about. Sia Kolisi obviously is the highest profile one with Kolisi Foundation, but so many of them, and many of the guys didn't even talk about it, but I know that almost everyone during April and May got stuck in somewhere with some sort of feeding program to try and help alleviate the plight of people around the country. And I feel like that awareness is something that 2019 brought to athletes in South Africa. They started realizing that they have a responsibility that stretches beyond their own immediate community, and that they are recognized worldwide for changing the face of the sport.
It's powerful, that is, isn't it? I mean, so we all know sport is powerful, and sport can impact on politics as well. You know, we've seen it recently with
Rashford.
Marcus Rashford. Yeah, exactly. And you know, you look through history and the Olympics and politics and all the other things that come with it. But it is really powerful, and you know, the more that these guys are doing away from their day-to-day of, you know, beating each other up on the pitch, the better, I suppose, for everyone, especially the less fortunate who don't have that representation and don't have that voice. It's fair play to them. You know, you've mentioned social media a couple of times. What's your relationship with social media like? And for all the great things you do, because you're female or because you're Afrikaans, because you're white, whatever it might be, do you get much heat? Do you get much sort of negative feedback from people? You know, I see on your Facebook, you're always sporting, you know, your inspiration of what you're wearing and trying to just give back to people. You know, you could do this, you can be like this, you can do whatever you want. Do you get much negative feedback and trolls and things like that at all?
I feel like I was definitely trolled back in 2011, 2012, 2013, when there was still this perception that I was intruding on a space.
The old boys club.
Yeah, I think that what irritates me now isn't, I feel also pretty immune to trolls now. I kind of feel like people can really kind of say what they want. Like,
that's not right though.
Yeah, but it doesn't do, it's like, I look at it and go, oh, it must be rough being you.
Yeah.
Not woes me. I think what irritates me more at the moment is the kind of sexual harassment aspect. And I love seeing that in the comment sections on a lot of my posts.
Where... sorry, can I be a pain? It just froze then. You said the thing that you...
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
No. So the thing that probably irritates me most at the moment is the sexual harassment aspect of having the amount of exposure online that I do. But I do love it when my followers in the comment sections below posts would reprimand men for the things they say to me and go,
Yeah.
have some respect, man.
Yeah.
So I love that that's happening, because I don't feel like it's my responsibility to get in there and go preach at a guy. I block
Yeah.
and ban people from my pages all the time. Like, and like, especially on Twitter, where people love having, you know, a little wine. I often just say, well, unfollow, friend. You're not paying to get my insights. Just look away. Block
Yeah.
me. Delete me. You know, like, please don't let me cloud up your day.
Yeah.
I really don't need you. Like, I honestly, I feel like if on social media, if you're complaining about what people are saying or doing, you are punishing yourself. No one is forcing anything down your throat.
It's weird, isn't it? Like, what's South African rugby Twitter like? Because in Wales specifically, I've been in Wales now since 2004, but being English before, Twitter wasn't really around, so I don't quite get stuck into England rugby Twitter as much. Like, I'm surrounded by Welsh rugby Twitter, and at times it is exhausting. It is nasty. It's negative. You know, 60, 70, 80% of the time. It's, you know, people say things to players or to players' girlfriends that I know that they would never say in the street, because they'd get filled in for one, but two, they get filled in by the girl probably as well, and that'd be even more embarrassing for them. Do you know what I mean? Like, what's it like in South Africa? Is that level of sort of behaviour and conduct and negativity, or are they a bit more understanding and appreciative?
I actually tucked into some people over the weekend because they were bitching and whining because a ref gave 2 yellow cards during a Bulls Sharks game. And, you know, like, I'm all for calling out decisions and saying the law was applied incorrectly, or this was an inappropriate way to interpret it, or whatever. But I actually just watched people going wee woo about these yellow cards, and, you know, this ref is missing a good game. And then I screen grabbed the laws. It was about tackles and players making contact with their head, and said, you know what, you can criticize the laws all you want, but in this case, if your team isn't applying the existing law correctly, you shouldn't be turning your eye towards, you shouldn't be taking it out on the ref. You should be telling your team, guys, let's adapt, because the laws have been this way around the tackle area and making contact with someone's head for, you know, the better part of 2 years. So maybe also let's take some responsibility. I feel like a lot of people just love throwing stones at refs, and that's the one thing that I hate. Is we will never attract amazing refs to rugby if we do not respect them. It is the same with teachers. It is the same with police officers. If you do not respect these people, nothing will ever improve. And so trashing a ref for the fact that you don't like the way the laws are written and are required to be applied doesn't increase the standard of rugby, and certainly won't raise the standard of refereeing. There are so many people who would make incredibly good refs that I have tried to convince to get into refereeing, who've said to me, not in South Africa, don't need that level of criticism and drama and victimization in my life. The only way we are going to raise the standard of refereeing is by making the referee's job something nearly sacred, that we take responsibility as fans for when we criticize, to ensure that we are criticizing the appropriate body, or take at least a fair and balanced view. I'm not saying don't criticize it. You are welcome to, but it is lazy and irresponsible taking aim at the ref when all that person is doing is their job.
I completely agree. I'd say here, it at times because we've got, we're fortunate we've got Nigel Owens, for example, who is excellent, and he's kind of the flagship standard of refereeing. He's excellent, but he's also quite funny and very vocal, and is on social media himself. So actually, he's probably loved more so than maybe other refs. I feel here the problem, from my experience looking at social media, so this isn't the gospel, is that what you've just said gets aimed more so at the players at times, and it's the players, one of the regions might lose. They might go to South Africa and get tumped by 30 points maybe, or whatever, in the Pro 14 or the European Champions Cup, or even internationally. Everyone is just on their bandwagon. So-and-so is shit. He shouldn't be picked. Why isn't so-and-so playing? And I'm just like, do you not get exhausted or bored of doing that? Because I'm not going to get bored of saying it's wrong that people do it and talking about it, because I don't feel it should happen. But I'd say here it's the players, and some of them, especially in Wales, I know have, you look at players who might have moved abroad or played elsewhere. It's some part of that reason is to get out of this goldfish bowl of regional or local rugby and people's opinions when they're sat in an armchair doing absolutely sod all physically with their life,
Yeah, I think that was so Supersport made a documentary, a 5-part documentary series about winning the Rugby World Cup called Chasing the Sun, where they had footage from in camp. I'm sure a lot of people have found it on Rugby Reddit and watched it illegally. And one of the interesting things to come out of this documentary series is everyone hated both Faf de Klerk for the amount of kicking he did during the Rugby World Cup, and Willie Leroux for the way he played, particularly in the knockout stages of the tournament. And they were probably the two of the most criticized people in South Africa in all of 2019. And I mean, our politicians have done some hair-raising shit. So for 2 rugby players to crack that list is, that's very impressive. People have been stealing hundreds of millions of rands, and yet people are bashing Faf de Klerk for kicking too much. But I think that those are 2 examples of players who really, the memes about them and the jokes at their expense and the hate mail, and and then when the documentary came out, a lot of people went, oh, now I actually really feel sorry for Willie, because now I'm hearing the other side of the story. And now I feel really bad about trashing Faf the way I did.
Yeah.
Because now I see what the tactics were. And so I've always said, I've had raging arguments with people in the industry about social media. Early on, producers kind of saying, Twitter's a fad, it's not going to be here by next Christmas. And I was like, that is wishful thinking.
Yeah.
But I've always felt that the only way to get through to those people who love to bash and trash and bully is by showing vulnerability. And this is something that isn't very rugby. Showing vulnerability is definitely not very Afrikaans.
Yeah.
Also not very rugby. And I think that the way that Rassie Erasmus has spoken to fans and to players and to the media about when things didn't go right, he would say, I made a mistake. I'm going to have to go back and look at exactly where we went wrong here, and we're going to have to fix it. Or this was we misread it, we didn't pick the right team, whatever. And I think that is exemplary leadership, being open enough, vulnerable enough to say, there was a mistake made, the mistake was made by me, and I will endeavor to fix it. Because once you say all those things, it shuts the trolls up almost instantaneously. And shutting them out and not opening up the channels of communication only makes them angrier and more vicious, and makes the conversation spiral even further into poison and toxicity. Whereas I feel like when you come out and throw open the books and go, I am sorry. So one of the first post-match interviews Sia Kolisi did after he became captain of the Stormers, this was long before anyone considered him captaincy material for the Springboks even.
Yeah.
I remember very clearly him doing an interview after a match the Stormers lost at home at Newlands. And it was so revolutionary because he got the first kind of stock standard question about losing. And he said, do you know, I just want to, and he turned to the stands. He was talking to the interviewer and he turned to the stands and he said, I just want to take this opportunity to tell everyone here that this hurts. Losing this way in front of you guys hurts, and we are embarrassed. We are sorry, and we are going to need a day or two to process this, because not one of us came here today even considering being able to walk away from this with anything other than a victory. And we take responsibility for it. We let you down, and we are sorry about that, but we will be back. Yeah. And I remember, I think I still sent him a DM when that happened and said, this is the most refreshing bit of vulnerability I have seen in rugby in years, because it wasn't just platitudes. It wasn't, yeah, we'll get back to the drawing board and fix our mistakes and address these and these. No fans really actually care about where you misread or didn't execute the game plan or whatever. I mean, that technical stuff to the average fan is, we have this expression, it's how the sausage is made. No one wants to see it. No one really wants to know what it says on the blackboard in the room. We're not interested in seeing the ingredients list. We just want to see the result. And when the result isn't what we want to see, we just want to know, be aware of the fact that you're also a person, and that we can see your humanity in this moment. Yeah. So I think that the easiest way of addressing trolls is by being vulnerable enough to show that when you have screwed up, you are big enough and magnanimous enough to apologize or to say, we got this wrong. This was bad. This was enough. And then also, I think that one of the ways that I have seen when people come for me on Twitter and they're ridiculous is I retweet them. And then I say, I'm so sorry that you're this upset about what I did. But I promise you, if you just unfollowed, I wouldn't even be an issue for you anymore. And the next time you see my face on TV, just, mute. And I feel like as soon as you do that and you turn it into a bit of a joke, generally, the trolls, I don't know, I feel like they just want to laugh with you. They just want to be part of the conversation. They just want to be heard or feel like they're heard. Yeah, exactly. They just want to feel a little bit important, that their voice has got through to you, and that's a win for them. But it's really power. It's people craving power. Yeah, of course it is. It's ridiculous. And so when you retweet them, you feed them. Yeah. And then suddenly they get onside. So the strange thing is, like, a lot of the time when you retweet trolls, suddenly they're on side. Then they feel very flattered by you. You see the messages then, like I've seen screenshots then of them sliding in DMs going, oh, I didn't really mean it like that. Like, I love your work. I love what you're doing. Your dress is amazing. Oh, fuck off, mate. I see it all the time. Let's, next year, obviously a big year for South Africa. Having not played any rugby this year, next year, got the Lions, hopefully, COVID all being well, fingers crossed. I am hoping. What's your take on that? Who, at the moment, would you say is sort of in the hot seat? Would you favour South Africa on home soil, or do you think the Lions have genuinely got a good chance? I mean, some of the home nation teams some of the players are playing some of the best rugby they ever have, but you just can't write the South Africans off because they're big, hard, nasty,
massive men with electric backs.
Nasty, yes.
Oh, they are.
It's gonna be so good. I'm so excited. I think it's going to go ahead. Only because we're in our second wave now, and they're still not shutting down the economy simply because we can't afford to. I'm very excited. I love the fact that the home nations are playing at the level they are, and that there is the kind of excitement and fire for this tour. I genuinely want the team who gets to go on this tour to be like the best Lions team ever.
Yeah.
That, I feel like that's what rugby fans deserve
after
this year. Like, I really just want everyone to be fit and firing.
The Lions against the world champions,
Yes.
That's what you want, isn't it?
Yeah. So I want the Lions to be like the best Lions team ever, and everyone's at their peak fitness, and everything must be like slick, and everyone's so together, and they have momentum coming into it, and so I am so there for all of the good stuff I'm hearing from the north. And one thing I can tell you is, so the Springboks haven't played, and the reason the Springboks didn't go to the Rugby Championship, I think, is very fair, because we restarted our domestic season much later than anyone else did. And it is understandable because of the conditions and the environment in South Africa. We were in winter at kind of in the deepest throes of this thing.
Yeah.
Very cold winter, much colder than we've had probably in the last decade here in Gauteng and in the interior. And so it was a very harsh season. And our medical facilities are, just simply inadequate. And so the government was incredibly cautious, very slow to release us from our levels of lockdown. We went for months without being able to buy cigarettes or alcohol, ever. It literally, you had no access. So I think that it's important for people to realize that the reason the Springboks didn't go to the Tri-Nations, the Rugby Championship, is simply because they were not match fit. And I think it was a very responsible call to make. We have now had a single round of Super Rugby unlocked, and now we're into Currie Cup, which is the second full round of the 4 teams will be joining Pro 16. The Bulls, the Lions, the Stormers, and the Sharks, but they're also playing the Griquas and the Pumas. And Jake White's Bulls team are scary in how effective they are. They are exceptional. They are really worthwhile watching. So if you can find South African rugby anywhere on where you watch rugby, go watch whenever the Bulls play. Go watch one of their games.
It's normally on Sky, I think, isn't it? Sky Sports. I think so. I think it's on Sky Sports here. Yeah.
So watch the Bulls. Really worthwhile. Frans Steyn kicked a 64-meter penalty weekend. Just the most Frans Steyn thing you can imagine. He's also playing fly half for the Cheetahs. He's just doing some crazy stuff at a pretty senior advanced rugby playing age.
He's been around for years.
Yes, he's like my age. He's old. And Morne Steyn is playing. Morne Steyn is also, here is a player who has suffered no more than a paper cut in his rugby playing career. There's just crazy luck when it comes to fitness. Apparently looking sharper than ever in all of the fitness tests, and fine form. So we are seeing some amazing form from our players coming through. I really feel like it was justified letting them play against other guys who haven't played all year and slowly building. Sharks, Kerwin Bosch outplayed Morne in the Bull Sharks game 2 weeks ago, and I have long been such a fan of Kerwin Bosch. He was an absolute prodigy when he was at age group level in school, and I feel like we have not seen Kerwin play the way that he is playing right now. I'm very excited about our depth at fly half. Obviously, we have monster forwards and a few of them coming through the ranks. There's some really depth in some positions coming through. And it's nice to see someone like Cheslin Colby being Cheslin Colby in the north. I mean,
unbelievable. He is unbelievable.
It's like you watch that stuff and you go, wait, how did you? Wait, let me watch that again because I don't even understand how the physics work.
He's so strong for a smaller guy as well. He's powerful. Get off.
And it's like he said afterwards as well. It's like he surprises himself. It is so intuitive. I mean, it's such a spectacular talent. I just feel fortunate. You know, when people talk about rugby players that you never saw playing, like you only now watch the highlights and you're like, oh, I don't really get it. I just love being able to watch Cheslin play the way he is playing. And I love him at the World Cup because he's a player that for so long, people like Nick Mallet would say, he must convert to scrum half. He's never going to make it as a wing. He's too small. It's like the most South African thing. So it's a really amazing seeing how our players have now, I feel like, really found a bit of rhythm. Of course, it is unheard of in South Africa to play rugby on Boxing Day and on New Year's Day. Look, we love a bit of Boxing Day cricket. Don't get me wrong. But in the rugby fraternity, I heard some rumors. This is not widely welcomed. The whole idea of having Currie Cup rugby played over our Christmas break, which people defend I mean, even in a year like this where so many people have lost jobs and so many companies Joburg is shutting down. No one is interested in doing business. So for rugby to continue over Christmas and over New Year is monumental. It's a very big deal that we are making that shift in South African rugby.
And it's weird because here everyone buzzes for Boxing Day, where you've got the horse racing on, you've got the football, you'll have the rugby on. New Year's Day, you'll have, depending on what day it falls on, you'll have all the, and also in Wales especially, so in the Pro 14, it's the derbies at Christmas.
Yes.
So again, the Arms Park in a normal world is absolutely packed out, 16,000 people. Unfortunately, with my job, we normally have a box there, so I'm there. Let's all have a few beers. We're all out after. Obviously, it's different this year, but that's normal for us. Like we don't, and I think it's the same with like your football, soccer. Here in the UK, they play right through Christmas, but in Europe, they have a week or 2 week break. So for us, Christmas is synonymous with good food, family, films, and sport. Like that's my Christmas. So it's interesting that you guys are almost. Well, we're not sure if we like this.
Yeah, so we're new to it. I think it's going to take off with the fans, and I think the players know this. I think that there's a level at which they realize this is gold. But they just don't want to be the guys who can't have Christmas. They just want to be the guys who captain's run on the 24th, you know. They don't want to be the guys doing it. They're like, leave it for next year. But I mean, if we are to integrate into Pro 16 rugby as anticipated, then this is a question of time.
What's your thoughts on that? What's your thoughts on them playing over here rather than, expanding what's already in the Southern Hemisphere?
Well, didn't it just seem a little visionary after the draw? Because now, we get to feel Scotland and Ireland out properly on domestic club level for a few years for 2023. Look, I think it's a no-brainer. I know I've had so many conversations with people from the UK who say, what are South Africa doing? This doesn't make any sense. Why would you want to come play here? And I don't think they understand what it's like week in and week out to fly from South Africa to New Zealand across 12 time zones and then play this weekend. It is nuts. The first time I flew to New Zealand, I was a wreck for a week. And I remember saying to Skalkberger, but how do you do this? And then you play Super Rugby, which is very intense. And remember, it's not nearly as hard flying here. It's hard flying there. flying east is a mess.
Yeah.
So I think that people underestimate the fact that we are not in the same time zone, and we are so far removed. It almost doesn't make sense playing across a whole hemisphere. I mean, imagine playing Premiership. If you're a Premiership rugby fan, imagine playing Premiership rugby against Japanese teams in Japan, and then back home, and then in Canada, and then back home, and then in Japan again, and then back home in one season. It is mental. And so I think the overnight flights up north, 11 hours, same time zone, I mean, I've done them 100 times. It is so much more manageable from a performance perspective. And then remember, the rand is incredibly weak. So for South African rugby teams to play against teams in other countries, the rand's relative weakness to the Aussie and Kiwi dollar compared to the pound, the pound it's twice what, I mean, so the benefit translates in South Africa is twice as financially viable.
Money talks.
And so that's something I think fans from UK often lose sight of, is we have immense talent, but South Africa from a rugby perspective isn't nearly as cash flush as the home nations, and commercial considerations weigh very heavily, because we are really battling to keep players here, and we'd love to keep players here. We'd love to have the best Springboks play in South Africa, but in order to do that, you have to be able to pay them.
Yeah, of course. No, I completely understand that. And obviously with South Africa, they don't have, I'm sure they don't have the rule in place where you have to play in South Africa to play for South Africa, like England or Wales are trying to keep their players here.
Remember, 2016, 2017, under Alistair Coetzee, that was the rule, 30 cap rule. Didn't work well.
Money talks. It's a short career, and you don't get remunerated for afterwards. You've got a 10-year window, maybe 15 if you're really fucking lucky, and that's probably at club level, let alone international level. It's probably shorter again. So you've got to sort of make hay when the sun shines.
And remember, so 4 teams are now gaining inclusion to pro rugby, which is great for pro rugby because we're bringing like specimens like Dwayne from Leland to the party, which is great. And then the Kings, hopefully the future version of the Kings, whatever that might be, and the Cheetahs, teams like the Pumas and the Griquas, the dream would still be to gain inclusion in some sort of Southern Hemisphere tournament that they could still compete in. I think that it's something that we have discussed in South Africa for a long time, behind the scenes, over a beer at the pub. Why are we playing across so many time zones? Why are we not playing in what do you call, so Southern Hemisphere, what do you call this in English? Halves. So rather play
in the Southern Hemisphere, northern, in the one time zone.
Yeah, so all of us, Europe, South Africa, United Kingdom, all of us in kind of relatively a 4-hour gap play one another. And then your Pacific Islands, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, Argentina, the States, Canada, the US, get them all playing together because relatively speaking, they're in each other's time zones.
So
and
you
then we still have,
you split the world up and down rather than northern and southern hemisphere, east and west.
This whole northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere division in rugby is a fiction. It's someone at some point very long ago going, oh, the equator has to be the line by which we divide all of this. Says who? Says why? It doesn't make any sense because as a TV viewer, I don't want to get up at 5:30 in the morning to watch rugby. I would like it in the afternoon. Thank you very much.
Yeah. It's interesting. You've touched on a few points there. I could chat to you all day about various different things. I feel like it's just two fans just talking about loads of shit now. But there's two things that I, just before we get on to them, Lions or South Africa next summer, who wins?
South Africa, obviously.
2-1 or 3-0?
2-1.
Oh, 2-1, tasty. Tasty. There's two things I want to just chat to you about quickly, if possible. Recently, BBC over here did an article on school sport and performance-enhancing drugs. Now, I don't expect you to, go all in or anything, but is it as bad as it is made out, or is it just pockets of people? Because, again, in the UK, especially in Wales at the moment, there's more and more people being caught, but they tend to be a bit more recreational rather than performance-enhancing. I've heard stories, and it's hearsay, but I've heard stories, drink this when you're in school. All right, wicked, and you play. And I've heard other stories which aren't for this, but is it as bad as the articles make out, or is it small pockets that just got busted?
Look, I think it is bad. Every conversation on the topic, every interview on the topic that I have done in the last 5 to 10 years, and I've had a few, have pointed to the fact that teenage boys, regardless of whether they play rugby or not, are chasing the ideal physique more than ever before.
Because of social media, that is. 100%. Everyone's comparing.
Everyone wants to look like some sort of underwear model. And a lot of these substances are going around because so many kids who are not athletes, who are simply doing it for aesthetic reasons, are abusing prohibited substances because it's a shortcut to results. Of course, I mean, the health risks involved are massive, but when you're 16, you think you're invincible, and how do you reason with a teenager anyway? So, I mean, kids have been doing drugs and drinking and smoking. I think that this falls into that category to a certain extent. And yes, in that sense, it is a widespread problem. I think the other thing that's really interesting, and I've had this conversation on an entirely different topic with surgeons in South Africa saying men here are even more, I don't want to use the word vain, but are even more body conscious than anywhere else because of our climate, because everyone wears thin t-shirts and revealing clothing for such a large, I mean, my husband wears golf shirts every day of the year. In winter, the jacket that goes over it just gets thicker. But and so they say that they see this huge rise among young men of, using these things to buff up. That being said, I think that it is a big issue, but that article uses or cites a lot of pretty old research and a lot of anecdotal stuff. And I don't think that you should only read that and think it's the full story. It isn't the full story. That it is an issue in rugby, I think, is a fact. It's a big issue in sport. It's not a uniquely rugby problem.
No. And
it's not a uniquely sport problem. But look, the huge 4-year ban that Apiwe Janchi got made headlines. It made waves. People were stunned. I think it sends a very clear message. It's probably one of the most high-profile doping cases in South African sport in a decade, because he is an educated, clearly very talented guy who made such, amazing strides. And I mean, I realized that he was found guilty, and so clearly, there is proof that of guilt. But I think it is also just such a tragic example for guys to take note of and go, it doesn't matter how talented you are. It doesn't matter how much progress you make. If you're going to be banned and only be able to resume professional rugby at 29, as he is, it's all for naught.
Yeah, down the drain. Like, make better choices. That's what we should all try and do in all aspects
And
of
you know
life.
what? I love players coming through who don't look like pin-up underwear models. I love Mornay Steyn for the fact that he just looks like a guy who works incredibly hard, but isn't gymmed to within an inch of his existence.
Yeah.
I love that there are guys who have cemented themselves as the gold standard in South African rugby, particularly in their specific positions, as backline players, particularly, who have shown that you don't need to look a certain way, you just need to be able to play a certain way. And that's probably the most positive example you can see.
Fair play. Yeah, I think, I mean, that's a tough old ban, 4 years, but hopefully it puts other people off, and he's the example that other people who might be doing it at a younger age need to go, I'm not going to become pro if I get caught doing that. So, yeah, the more we can stamp it out, the better. Finally, I know I've taken a load of your time, so I do appreciate it. Thank you. Where can people find you, and what have you got coming up?
Just follow on Twitter or Instagram, Elma Kapelma, which is an Afrikaans nickname that got completely out of hand. It was never supposed to be my handle, and now I'm kind of... I would love to make kind of more fun content, and so I'm working on a few things, but nothing I can talk about just yet. So I would say just kind of keep following and come along for the ride, and hopefully I'll be popping up on your feed with some good, fun stuff.
Love that. Massive thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. I think I love cricket as well, and we haven't even spoken about cricket today. So, well, when we, next year or the year after.
At the moment, South African, we would like to pretend that cricket doesn't exist.
See, when I was growing up, when you had your Mackay and Teeny and people like that, like even before that with Pollard and Jonty, and then you had like your Boucher and Callis, and then Graham Smith, and I've always been quite a big cricket fan, so I'd love to get you on again sometime in the future. We'll have a chat about cricket. Maybe South Africa have improved a little bit, and we can have a chat about that as well. But look, massive thank you.
As soon as 90% of the chat isn't focused on what's happening in the boardroom, we can chat cricket.
I think that would be the same for lots of sports in lots of different countries. Especially, you look at English cricket with Kevin Peterson as well. I listened to his autobiography the other day on Audible, and I finished it, and I loved him as a player because he's X Factor and he's a renegade, and I love mavericks in sport because I was a bit of a maverick as a kid, and I probably still am a bit of a renegade now. And to hear the politics behind the scenes that went on, whether I appreciate it's his side of the story, so that's half of the story, and then there'll be another half, whether it's Andrew Strauss's, Alistair Cook's, or Flowers, or whoever, and somewhere in the middle is the truth. I fully appreciate that. But to hear that side of the story and the way he was treated because he was brilliant but outspoken for the right reasons most of the time is unbelievable. So I'd love that conversation with you sometime in the future as well, and we can have a chat about cricket, all right?
Well, thanks for having a Sappho on, and I'd definitely let you know when next time in Cardiff so we can actually have a beer in person. Yes,
I would love a beer. I'll get you a Tiny Rebel. So Tiny Rebel's a beer company in Wales. They give me beers for every episode, but because we started this at 9:30 this morning, I haven't had a beer. So I'll get you a Tiny Rebel. We'll have a few beers. Big thanks to them. They give us the beers every episode. Big thanks to everyone who subscribes, downloads, rates and reviews. Catch us on Instagram and Twitter at Catflap Chats. Yours is Elma Kapelma. We'll tag you in all of the socials when this goes live on Monday. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I didn't even realise it's been 90 minutes and it's gone like that. So...
What?
Yeah, it just shows like I've absolutely loved that. I've loved getting your experience and your. Oh, hello,
And even Frank has come to say hi.
little
He's like,
Frank.
"What are you doing, woman? Come give me attention."
I love your outlook. I love what you've done in the sport. Long may it continue, and hopefully we can have that beer soon. All right.
Awesome. Cheers.
Thank you. Take care. Ta.